My next guest is the founder of International Man and a dear friend and mentor of mine. He is the best-selling author known for his High Ground novel series and is a world-renowned speculator and libertarian philosopher. He has garnered a well-earned reputation for his controversial insights and into politics, economics, and investment markets. Please welcome my friend Doug Casey. Doug, how are you?
I'm good, Mikkel. I guess you're back in Panama, and I'm in Thailand. I'm in Phuket, to be exact.
Yeah, we were just chatting a second ago. That is a long journey all the way over to Thailand and Southeast Asia. How are you seeing things in Southeast Asia after COVID and after all this hysteria?
Well, I think that Southeast Asia is the place to be, quite frankly. I mean, and I speak as somebody that has a significant footprint and liking for South America in particular, Uruguay and Argentina. But uh, these countries here are largely unaffected by the stupidity that we're experiencing on a wholesale level in the West. So, if people have forgotten about having a crib someplace else in the world, along with the Southern Cone and a few other countries, I would definitely put Malaysia and Thailand both high on the list. They're very different from each other, but similar in other ways.
Okay, I'm impressed to hear that. I've traveled very extensively through that region, lived in Singapore back in the day, and probably been to both countries 20, 30, 40 times, and I loved it over there. I had heard, I haven't been back since COVID, but I had heard they had some pretty draconian lockdowns in that part of the world. Did you
I,
hear any
yeah.
stories about that while you've been back?
No, I didn't. And I was pleased to see that very few people are wearing masks now. Uh, so maybe they've learned their lesson. Of course, I wonder if the world at large has learned the lesson that COVID was a scam and the vaccines were even a more dangerous scam. I guess that's all in the you'll find out department, but it's pleasant over here. Everything works. It's efficient. It's inexpensive. It's physically safe. I mean, these countries have an awful lot to recommend them. And uh, especially if you stay away from places that are, well, where there are too many package tours, which are annoying. Uh, they're just delightful.
I'm very impressed. I'm actually a little bit surprised because I've kind of gone to some countries recently where the scar of this psychological damage that's been done to them is very deep. Like I was flying just recently last week, and there were still people wearing not just masks, but like N95, like those ones that are suction cupped to your face. And I'm like, Jesus, that's cutting off oxygen to your brain. Like, don't you realize we're 5 years on here?
Yeah, well, maybe that's helping to cleanse the gene pool because when you look at how dumb the average person is, then you have to recognize that by definition, half of them are less than average in intelligence. And perhaps we're moving into an idiocracy at this point. In fact, it was only yesterday or the day before, I was reading an article in one of the national U.S. newspapers. Was it the Wall Street Journal? Was it that fag hag rag from D.C., the Washington Post? I can't, or maybe the New York Times. But one of the three of them had an article about students at very prestigious universities not having read any books during high school or grade school. They basically live on their telephones, which makes them rather short attention spanny. So what I said about developing into an idiocracy was not entirely a joke.
Brutal. While over in Thailand, are you going to get a chance to meet up with Mark Faber? He's speaking at the conference this week as well. He's based out of
Oh,
there.
well, not the conference that I was at. That was in Kuala Lumpur. which I've got to say, I was very favorably impressed by. It's like Singapore light. It's got that it's a Mohammedan society, but it's not bothersome. But other than that, it's come up so much. It's developed just immensely. The first time I went to KL was, gee, I don't know, 45 years ago, and it is transformed. In fact, let me mention this. It's that you go to any American city today, or Canadian city for that matter, and you could drop me into New York or Toronto or LA, San Francisco, it doesn't matter. And it's all pretty recognizable from the way it was back then, although the demographics are changing radically, but physically, they're pretty much the same. But here, all of these Oriental cities they've been rebuilt from the ground up. They're ultra modern, new buildings, high rises, super highways. I mean, it's not the quaint Orient that, frankly, I used to love. Even Hong Kong. I mean, I started living in Hong Kong at the very tail end of the Susie Wong days. Forget about it. It's all high rises, and it's changed tremendously. But they're
Well,
developing, is what I'm saying. And the U.S. Isn't building anything new or notable, but here they are.
I remember your story. You told me a story once in Hong Kong that you ended up buying a penthouse apartment or something like that in Hong Kong, top floor,
Oh
for
yeah,
like massively discounted prices.
it was incredible. It was I think we bought that place in 1986, and it was above the Hong Kong Yacht Club with a fantastic view of the harbor on the top floor. And if I told you how little we paid for it, uh, it would be embarrassing, because that was during a China crisis. And on the top floor, people were afraid that when the Chinese came and took the place over, they wouldn't fix the elevators. And nobody wanted to walk up 13 floors. So a top floor apartment was less than a horrible ground floor apartment. And that was as a real estate speculation, it was fantastic. What did we get? Not counting the costs of renovation, because of course we wanted to fix it up to our standards. But from the price we paid for it, the price we sold it for, we got, over the course of 20 years, we got 20 to 1 on our money, cash on cash. Now that is a hell of a hit in the stock market, but in the real estate market, it's a super hit.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, going back to Mark Faber, yeah, he'll be speaking with me at this year's summit in a couple of days. He's also based out of Thailand. Are you guys going to have a chance to have coffee? I know you guys know each other.
No, because he's in Chiang Mai, and I'm in Phuket, which is in the far south end of the country, an island. So nope, we're not going to run into each other actually. But interestingly, one of the guys that I've been spending some time with here is a chap named Michael Yan. Do you know him?
I know his work for sure. He's the war correspondent, correct?
Exactly. And he's got a very interesting background. And most recently, he's known for monitoring the Darien Gap, where he's been many, many times out in the jungle and the whole type of thing, doing his ex-soldier stuff. And it's interesting because the way Michael sees it, and I think he's right, the U.S. is actually undergoing an actual invasion now, an actual invasion with millions and millions of young military-age males wandering into the country and being given cell phones and given money and free medical care and being transported to places and so forth. Yeah, he feels that this is a very, very serious thing from an actual military point of view. And I would not gainsay him. I think it's very, very serious from a cultural and demographic point of view. So it's and a financial point of view and a political point of view. It's a disaster. The U.S. that we used to know, well, to hell with the U.S., America, which we used to know and love. And America is basically a concept. It's an idea. The U.S. is just a nation state, but call it what you will. It's being washed away right before our very eyes. And uh, Michael and I have been talking about the fact that we're likely going to go into a civil war in the next few years. Not like 1861 to 1865, but very unpleasant between the red people and the blue people and the migrants who are a force unto themselves.
Well, I've been following this a little bit myself because I'm based out of Panama City. And I've been hearing a lot of these things where they're coming through the Darien Gap and people are saying that, oh, Panama's to blame, Panama's to blame. It's like, no, not at all. There's literally buses that are taking them from one side of Panama to the other. I'm in downtown Panama City. We don't see it. We don't hear it. You know nothing about it. No one on the streets has any idea about these types of things. It's not like there's more homeless people on the street or anything like that. If anything, there's actually less. So I think that what they're really doing is just getting them on a bus as soon as they get through the Darien, bringing them down to Costa Rica, bringing them to Nicaragua, and they're just one by one just taking them across borders and just shipping them up to the US. And now it's like, okay, now it's your problem. And going through these countries, like I was just in El Salvador last month. I've traveled to almost every country in Latin America, both 20 some odd years ago, as well as again, since I've been back in Latin America. And these countries are incredibly safe now. Like there's actually fantastic places you can go where, okay, yes, the Bukele work of arresting gang members is one side of it, but the other part is that the US has just took everybody. Like Honduras emptied their prisons. They just said, there's the door, there's the border, get the hell out. And Honduras is now actually a relatively safe place to be, where if you look 5, 10 years ago, it wasn't.
You're right. uh, I'd say after El Salvador, which was the bottom of the barrel. I mean, I thought that I thought that country was headed for failed state status and collapse, but now it's one of the safest countries in the world, and Honduras wasn't far behind it, quite frankly.
Correct.
Um, and it's funny what you just said about the fact that these so-called refugees, uh, if they were real refugees hiding from, running from uh, whatever bad things the government could do to you because they would stop in Panama, perfectly nice place, but they're being shipped to the U.S. Look, I hate to talk about conspiracies, but it seems to me there's an actual conspiracy abroad to have a color revolution in the U.S. and actually overturn the nature of American society at this point.
Any idea who this is? Like we see a lot of these dark things that are happening in the world, but trying to understand who's actually doing it or pointing the finger at the right party is very hard. Any idea of who you think it might be?
Warm body, who's the actual uh, Mr. Big or Dr. No or whoever it is in back of this
Exactly.
thing. Yeah, I don't know. I ask people who I feel might be in a position to know, and I don't get any real answers. I mean, certainly that little scumbag son of George Soros's who's just mated with Huma Abedin, a woman 10 years his senior. I mean, he's apparently doing all he can to destroy what's left of America. Uh, this is another odd thing. There's so much sexual deviancy going on in the world today. And I'm not saying that this is the case, but it's somewhat unusual. It's that uh, a lot of uh, people males, soy boys, if you would, are mating with people that are their mother's age, like that little poofter that runs France, Macron, is another example of that. And there's another that slipped my mind. And in Argentina, of course, I was saying, God, this is wonderful what's happening in Argentina. And of course, uh, the election of Milei is a historic event, a self-declared anarcho-capitalist. But even in Argentina, where the deep state is fighting him tooth and nail, he's not acting like an ANCAP would. He's, I mean, saying that he wants Argentina to join NATO. I mean,
All that.
that's a stupid idea. He wants he's supporting that, that criminal little creep Zelensky. Well, what's the matter with him? That he wants to get involved in that war of Israel against the Palestinians. It's none of our business. Okay, I, I wish them both sides well, or a pox on both their houses. It's not none of, so he's doing that. He hasn't abolished the central bank yet. He hasn't fully destroyed all these agencies and pulled them out by their roots, which is the only way you win. You don't just cut stuff back. That just allows them to grow back bigger and better. You've got to pull them out by their roots and sow Agent Orange where they grew. So I'm afraid that high hopes that I had, I think we're going to be disappointed in Milei, although he's vastly better than the alternative, of course.
Sure. It's one of those countries where I'm still sitting on the sidelines. I actually have to go back to Argentina next month to do some work. I love Argentina as a place to spend time. It's gorgeous. The food is amazing. People are lovely. The wine is great. Lots of things to do. But when you have 100 years, 120 years of just filth in politics, it's hard to get rid of that in such a short period of time. What I'm doing with my clients is we're just sitting on the sidelines for right now and kind of waiting and seeing. If he makes it through a full term, if he can do something real, not just talk, but really do something, then I absolutely reserve the right to reassess things and bring people down. I'm happy with things the way things are going, but it's still not enough in my books.
Yeah, I have to agree with you 100%. And I speak as somebody who's very, very long Argentine real estate. Uh, and I'm hoping that, well, look, things are so bad in Europe. I mean, that place is on the front line of World War III, no matter whether we're talking Israel or the Ukraine that starts it. And there might be another blow up with another country. So Europe is not the place to be, in addition to the fact that it's being run out of Brussels. It's a hotbed of collectivism and socialism. So anybody with any money and any sense will get the hell out of Europe for lots of reasons. So where's he going to go? Well, like I said, I like the Orient, but if you go to the Orient, you're absolutely never going to become personally a Thai or a Malaysian or whatever. Well, it's not. So the place to go is Argentina or Uruguay, the way I see it.
Mm.
Uh, and I think that there are going to be thousands and thousands of wealthy Europeans and North Americans that are going to be going down to Argentina and Uruguay. So even if Malay isn't everything he should be or could be, still it's one of the best places in the world at this point. And you got to go someplace. You can't act like a potted plant and just stay where you are. That's not a survival technique in tough times.
100%. Well, we've got Juan Federico Fischer, who is a mutual friend of ours, speaking at the event this week to talk about Uruguay. I've been down there to visit him, to visit you several times over the last few years, and it really is one of the most beautiful places. I would argue absolutely a first world country. They have proper infrastructure there. It's expensive compared to neighboring countries, but I'm happy to pay that type of money if you get a good standard of living. And then when you couple that with a very friendly tax environment, at least from the income tax side, the VAT not so much, but the income tax side is quite attractive there. It is a very good option for a lot of people, I think.
I agree. I'm a fan of Uruguay, and I'm a fan of Argentina too. And I don't know if you've mentioned to your folks that in Argentina, you can become a citizen in only 2 years, which is among the shortest periods. And that's only living there 6 months of the year for 2 years. Uh, and it's a good passport. So people ought to consider that too. And real estate is still very, very cheap in Argentina. It's recovered a lot from the bottom, but it's still cheap. And here's something I picked up when I was in Malaysia. I was talking to some Venezuelans, and I didn't realize that the property market in Venezuela bottomed about 6 months ago after coming down 90% from the previous peak. And when any real estate falls 90%, well, you got to get, they say that houses have tripled. So they're back to about a third what they were before. And the reason they say is two things in Venezuela. Number one, as you mentioned earlier, they've exported all their criminals. They're all in
Correct.
the US.
Venezuela is now actually a relatively safe country, which is
Yeah,
shocking.
it is shocking. And the other reason is that Maduro, criminal that he is, and stupid as he is, uh, recognizes, well, if I need money, one way to get it is by having a special economic zone, which he's creating in Margarita Island, which is a
Which is beautiful. Yep.
delightful, yeah. So actually, if you're an early adopter, Venezuela is worth getting on a plane to Caracas, and you won't be kidnapped or killed or mugged, probably, the way you would have been a few years ago.
Well, I don't know if you saw, but Maduro decided that this year Christmas is going to be in September, I think it was September or
Oh yeah,
October or something like that. So he just like,
yeah. I still don't understand his reasoning. Although when you're dealing with a person like that, reasoning isn't the right word.
yeah.
I don't
It reminds me of
understand.
being back. I was in North Korea 15 years ago, 12, 15, yeah, 12, 15 years ago, I was in North Korea. And it was the same kind of thing that they just like arbitrarily just make up these wacky things. And now, as a populace, you just need to believe it.
Yeah. Well, if the government says it and the government's always right, we've been told that our whole lives. Yeah, it must be the case. Yeah, it's we live in a bizarro world, quite frankly, and most of the governments and most of the countries in the world are going in the wrong direction. And this has been the case for the last 100 years because at the turn of the 19th century, um, uh, well, forget about that. The turn of the 20th century, we're talking what I meant to say, a little over 100 years ago, uh, almost no country had income tax. There was no VAT. There was no sales tax. None of that nonsense anywhere. It was basically import duties and excise taxes. That was it. So, but now most of these countries take 30, 40, 50, 60% or more of the GDP, and it comes out of the pockets of productive people. So I don't know if there's going to be a revolution or whether we're just going to go straight into 1984. It's unclear to me. It could go either way.
100%. I don't know if you watched back in the day the Twilight Zone or the Outer Limits, or now the new one is Black
Oh,
Mirror. But sometimes I look
yeah,
at
I
what's
love
going on in the
those.
world and I'm like, Jesus, this is like a bad episode of that.
You're absolutely right, Mikkel. And not only that, I don't think most people grok that election day in the US in a month or so is uh, Guy Fawkes Day. And Guy Fawkes Day, everybody should have seen. And if you haven't seen it, you should go and see it now. V for Vendetta. That's what should happen on Guy Fawkes Day in the US.
Solid movie. Last thoughts on Venezuela. I was supposed to go there like I think 5 years ago with an Argentinian lawyer colleague of mine who was buying up real estate hand over fist, um, basically speculating that if Maduro got out of power, that this would just go through the roof. Maduro's still there and more entrenched than ever. But it's interesting to hear from your side that actually real estate prices are going up because who would have expected as we were talking about the safety in some of these Latino countries now, because the Democrats decide that they want to take criminals from all over Latin America as their new populace. Like,
Yes. Yeah, it's a great way to get rid of your criminals, violent criminals in jails, export them to the US. And of course,
criminals are expensive to house in the country. Like, that's not
oh,
cheap.
yeah, but we house them. We do better than that. We don't just house them. We give them credit cards and free medical and everything else in the US. It's we live in a bizarro world.
100%. Any thoughts on Paraguay? If you like Uruguay and Argentina and some of the other Southern cone, have you spent much time in Paraguay? Any insights there?
Yeah, I've been there a couple of times, separated by 20 years each time.
Mm.
I've had interesting adventures in Paraguay. It's a very unusual country in lots of ways. And I like Paraguay. I I do. Uh, and oddly, I think it's one of the more stable countries in Latin America because almost everybody speaks not only Spanish but Guarani, the native Indian language, whereas in places like Ecuador and Peru and Bolivia and other places, the Indians are kind of getting restless again and figuring after 500 years, hey, we want these Europeans out of here. They conquered us 500 years ago, and we don't like them anymore. Uh, Forget about all the good things we gave them. Anyway, yeah. So all these countries in South America are all very different from each other.
Yeah, 100%. I've really identified Paraguay as if you want to start society from scratch, if you want to move somewhere and have pretty much be just left alone. It's a food, water, energy independent country. There's not a ton of infrastructure there, but the tax system is phenomenal. It's all territorial tax system. It's a peaceful place. The country is basically run by a half a dozen families and all in Ascension, all in the capital. So there's very little chance of any socialism coming in because they can just squash that. It's a right-leaning pro-business country. It just got investment grade rating by Moody's. So there's just massive amounts of money flowing into that place. And it's kind of been flat for 20 years. And now I think we're at the inflection point for Paraguay.
I agree with you. And it's full of Germans with a lot of good German habits. It's got just
Correct. Yeah, it's something
scores
like
of thousands
10%
of
of the
Germans.
population are German or from German ancestry. And
Yeah.
they own a lot of the businesses. They're building a lot, they're creating. It's very interesting to see.
Yep, it is. The only thing I have against Paraguay is that most of the country, the weather is not great. It's hot, but hey, you can't have everything sometimes.
Exactly. Well, I live in Panama because of the good legal system and the lack of taxes here, but it's hot here as well. Not as hot as Paraguay. I think Paraguay gets really hot. Panama gets to
Yeah, well,
32,
you've
34 degrees.
got the ocean and air conditionings
Correct.
everywhere in Panama City.
Exactly. Exactly. So, any other predictions for us? We talked a lot last year about the price of gold. You were bang on that one. We're sitting at some substantial gains in precious metals during 2024. What's your thoughts for 2025?
Yeah, I was certainly right about gold. And uh, sadly, not sadly for me, but because I've been buying gold for the last 50 years, uh, whenever I could, and I've never sold an ounce of it. It's going higher for all kinds of reasons that we don't have to get into now. I think silver is going to join the party. It's at $30 or something like that, 31 or something like that, but it could go much, much higher. So I think it's an excellent speculation at this point. Um, what else? Well, stay out of stocks, stay out of bonds. They're both in kind of bubble territory. Uh, and American real estate, same thing. It's sitting on a mound of debt, and interest rates go up. It's going to get hurt, and you don't want to own it anyway. Now, I'm afraid that name of the tune for the years to come is to stay liquid, own gold, own silver, own Bitcoin. I'm a fan of Bitcoin too. And if you want to speculate, speculate in these crappy little mining stocks, which are very, very depressed right now. But that's been the case 5 times over the last 50 years. And they've subsequently, as a group, gone 10 to 1, with some of them going 100 to 1, which is pretty unbelievable in the course of a few years. But it's a very, very volatile market that everybody hates at this point, but it's been ticking up. So I guess that's kind of my investment posture at this point. Stay liquid, don't have a lot of debt, except if you own a house in the US, I hope you refinance it at 3% mortgage because it's like a gift, you know.
What we're doing with a lot of our private clients is they're liquidating their $1 million house, $2 million house in Canada or the United States. We're moving it to safer jurisdictions, a lot of the countries that we've discussed today, and buying smaller properties. You can have a very nice home for somewhere to live for maybe $300,000. And I mean like a nice place to live. Now take that other $1 million or whatever, $500,000 that's left over and buy 5, 10 rental properties, pay cash for them, don't have any debt, and you have multiple doors in a couple of just different jurisdictions. And if the US dollar goes to hell or whatever currency you're in goes to hell, you have options to make private contracts, get paid in Bitcoin, get paid in something else. Once you own the underlying asset with complete freehold title deed type of property with no debt, and it's a solid asset, people need somewhere to live. I think that that is a solid strategy for weathering the storm.
You're absolutely right. And in Buenos Aires, so I'm reasonably familiar with prices in Buenos Aires. If you buy an apartment in the best part of BA, which is the part that you should buy an apartment in if you're going to buy, and you should buy, it'll cost you 10%, less than 10%, what the same apartment would cost you in the equivalent area in New York. Could cost you 5%. I mean, it's not like free, but it's really, really cheap.
Mhm. Yeah, if
And
you take that math,
I wouldn't doubt that in a generation, the prices of Buenos Aires property, which are very, very cheap, and New York, they're going to flip. And people will want property in BA and they won't want it in New York. So that's a good trade to make.
well, imagine people out there who have, say, a $2 million property, they have $1 million worth of equity, $1 million worth of debt. Sell that price off, take your $1 million of equity, move it down to Latin America, buy a nice place to live, cash free and clear. And I'm not talking about some hut. Like, I mean, you can get a really
I
stunning
know,
place
a
and
nice
use the
place.
rest of it on cash flowing properties and enjoy your life. And when you look at, like, a lot of my clients are lawyers, accountants, doctors, small business owners. Basically, if you are white, male, and heterosexual in the United States and Canada right now, you're basically the devil incarnate. So they're coming for you big time. And the amount of my clients who are nervous about being sued, or their neighbor got sued, or someone else at the hospital got sued, or they're being sued is just unbelievable. And a lot of this insurance that you have to protect yourself against lawsuit is not covering the amount of the suits. I have a client who's a spine surgeon. He makes something like $800,000 a year. His insurance covers him up to about $2 million, but his colleague just got sued for over $4 million. So that's a pretty disastrous situation. So get yourself out of debt, move overseas. If you can, retire early, get some cash flowing properties and go out there and enjoy your life. Why do you want to stay in the market in the workforce for longer and increase your time of being sued? And they hate you anyways. So like
Yeah.
what service do you have to continue to provide? Or if you want to provide service, do it through, consulting or telemedicine or management fees back to a company, but do it from a safe environment on the other side of the world.
Well, you're totally right, Mikkel. And not only that, I'm talking about a doctor. Uh, medical tourism is very underrated. I haven't had insurance when I'm in the US for many years. Because if anything serious goes wrong, I would go to Thailand where I can have better medical care, a lot less nonsense, and maybe 15% of the cost. Same in Argentina. Same in Argentina. Same in Brazil. I mean,
Hmm.
there's frankly, same in Mexico. I, I mean, the cost of medical in the US is absolutely insane. And the quality is not there because it is so hyper regulated, and the doctors are all running scared of the liability that you mentioned and so forth. Yeah, exactly.
Well, our first child was born in the Middle East. Our second child was born in Brazil. We flew in while my wife was 6, 7 months pregnant, gave birth to the second child in Brazil. I think that was $3,500 for private doctor, private hospital, private room, like the suite at the hospital, everything. We were there for 3 nights. Amazing. We just had our third child earlier this year. We went to Chile, and it was like a resort. The hospital was absolutely
Yes.
insanely gorgeous in the mountains. I was going for a walk every day. The doctors spoke English, fantastic. And I think it was just under $10,000 in Chile. And with a Chilean passport for my third child, he has visa-free access to the United States, to Canada. It's a tier A passport. Like it's absolutely unbelievable. So medical tourism, there's so many things that people can do. I used to send my mother to Korea. She had to have eye surgery. She had it done over there. My dentist, I used to go to South Korea to go and see my dentist when I lived in the Middle East. It was like a 7-hour flight or something like that. And the level of care and the level of equipment and skill was just unbelievable and a fraction of the cost.
Yep, you're absolutely correct. I second that emotion and underline it.
Amazing. Well, Doug, any final thoughts for us? Any final predictions leading up to the election, leading into 2025?
Uh, but whatever you're going to do, think about it, act now, beat the last minute rush, because there are going to be a lot of people panicking in the next few years.
100%. Scary but true. Doug Casey, thank you very much. I will talk to you soon. Have a great day.
Pleasure.